Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Corner. You know, I always say Andy's Corner is that happy little place in the world where we sit back and talk about all things heating and air. Today I wanted to talk about the efficiencies of your gas furnaces. You know, I get a lot of questions about these, you know, what furnace is right, what efficiency do I need, what's the best one, all this kind of stuff. And so that's what I wanted to talk about, because heating season is going to be here soon. If you're a service tech, you know that it's right around the corner. We're going to be starting some of our heating maintenances. We're going to be working on some no heat calls. You know, the nights get cold and somebody will call, try to turn it on, and they'll call because it doesn't work. So the time is coming quickly. The other thing is a lot of people decide in the fall to buy new equipment. Maybe last year your furnace didn't do real well, it didn't keep up, or maybe you had some problems with it. And it's one of those things you keep saying, well, push it off until next year, because that's what everybody says. There's always next year. So, you know, I'm not big on keep pushing it off. If you got problems with it, just replace it. And that way you don't have to worry about it so much. And it'll cost you a lot less in the long run. So either way, I wanted to talk about the efficiencies. They rate, here in the States, they rate gas furnace efficiency on their AFUE, which stands for Annual Fuel Utilization Efficiency. It's much easier to say AFUE rather than Annual Fuel Usage Efficiency, because that's hard to say. I say it all the time and it's still hard for me to say. So if you've ever seen that number somewhere, you know, you saw it on your furnace, or you hear somebody talking about it, maybe you're buying a new furnace and they keep talking about these different percents and these different percent numbers. Those numbers, that is your AFUE rating. That's how they rate the furnaces. Like I said, one's more efficient than the other, and a lot of it breaks down to what it's going to cost you monthly. Now, everybody always wants to know exactly what it's going to cost. You know, well, if I buy a 90%er, or if I buy a 98%er, you know, how many dollars a year is that going to save me? How many dollars a month? I don't know. There's a lot of different calculators out there to where you can come close. But me personally, I don't believe a lot of those because there's so many variables involved. Every house is different. Every year, or at least where I'm at, every season is different. You may be in one of those areas where you've got the pretty standard temperatures, high and lows, you know, all the time. Where I'm at, man, we may have a winter where it's colder than cold, and then the next year we'll have a really mild one. So summer's the same way for our air conditioners. So we never really know. So I always say there are too many variables to be able to tell you exactly how many dollars you can save. But the easiest way that I do tell people, somebody told it to me a long time ago, and that's what I relay to everybody, is okay, we've got 80% furnaces, 90% furnaces, 96% furnaces. Let's start with the 80%er. If you have an 80% efficient furnace, and that percentage is your AFUE rating. So if you have an 80% furnace, if you feed that furnace $1, it'll give you 80 cents worth of heat. There's 20 cents there that gets wasted out the exhaust pipe, because with any gas burning or combustible fuel fired furnace, you're always going to have some waste. You're always going to have exhaust. They will never, I don't believe anyways, they will never come up with a 100% efficient gas-fired furnace. I don't believe that's it can't be. So as of now, they don't have it. I don't think they're going to come up with anything, because you will always have an exhaust. You will always have waste of some sorts. That exhaust, that waste is CO, CO2, all the different chemicals that are off-gassed in the combustion of that fuel. That's a whole nother story for another video, how the combustion actually works inside of a furnace, but that's the gist of it. You have an 80%er, you feed it $1, gives you 80 cents worth of heat. You have a 90% furnace, you feed it $1, gives you 90 cents worth of heat. Have a 96%er, you give it $1, gives you 96 cents worth of heat. You get where I'm going with this? So basically it's just how the furnaces are ranked higher than what some of the other furnaces are. So a lot of it is more for, in my opinion, more for comparison. You know, you can buy an 80% efficient furnace, or you can buy a 96% efficient furnace. You know, which one's going to be more efficient? But you know, that's how everybody uses those numbers. There are a lot of different ways to look at that AFUE rating, and I've got some opinions on it because it is a government-based system that they come up with. You know, a lot of the furnaces, well, if it's you put a 2-stage gas valve on it, you automatically get a couple of points. If you have put a variable speed blower motor on it, you automatically get a couple of points. So, you know, there's people out there in test labs They take these, prototype furnaces from all these different manufacturers. They set them up, and they look at what it has and all these things, and they say, okay, with this, and this will be a 98% efficient furnace, or however that goes. So like I said, my biggest thing is look at it as a comparison from one furnace to another. That's where we're going with that. So, if you don't know what you have already, go to your basement or your furnace closet or wherever your furnace is at and take a look and see what you do have, or have your favorite contractor come out there and take a look. If you have an 80% furnace, it may look like this one up here, or is it over here? I don't remember. I'll put it up on the picture there somewhere, but it may look like that one there, where you've got a metal flue pipe. That's the biggest thing to look at there. You've got a metal flue pipe on an 80% efficient furnace. They have one heat exchanger in there, and like I said, they're 80% efficient. They put about 20% of that out the flue pipe. So the flue gases are a lot hotter. That's why they use a metal flue pipe. They don't condense or anything like some of the other furnaces, but that's the easiest way to tell if you have an 80% efficient furnace. See what kind of flue pipe it's got. If it's metal, it's an 80 something. Or if you go down there and you look and you've got one that looks like this, or maybe over here, up there somewhere, and you see those two plastic PVC pipes coming out. There are some that only have one plastic pipe that comes out, but if it's got PVC pipes there, it's a 90 plus efficient furnace. They, like I said, as far as the 80s and the 90s, we always call them 80s and 90s, but there's actually 90, 92, 94, 96, 98, there's all the different ones there. But if it has plastic PVC flue pipe, typically it is a 90 plus efficient furnace. The flue gases, by the time they get to that flue pipe, are a lot cooler once they get there out of a 90 plus efficient furnace. So they do condensate in the pipe. So we have to use plastic pipe that's sealed. That way all the water can trickle back and go down through the drains. It's another way to tell what you have is if it has a drain coming out of it, it's probably a 90% efficient furnace. And most of the time they have two pipes running out. One's your exhaust, like I said, where it condensates and the drain comes down, and the other side is your intake, where it's bringing your combustion air into the furnace. So that's an easy way to tell. The reason that those flue gases are cooler, if I can get my words to stay working here. The reason those flue gases are cooler, because on a 90 plus efficient furnace, you have technically two heat exchangers in there. You have a primary, which is your normal cell or your normal tubular heat exchanger inside of there. Most all the new ones are tubular heat exchangers. Say that one several times fast. That's really hard to do. Most of them are tubular heat exchangers now, but they also add a secondary coil in there, or secondary heat exchanger in there. So it gives it a couple more passes with the heat across that blower, picking up the heat and moving it out before the flue gases actually get out of the furnace. That's how they gain some of their efficiency, and that's also why the flue gases condensate, so that's why you have a drain. Again, you can have differences with what kind of gas valve you have on it. If it's a two-stage furnace, that have a two-stage gas valve. Variable speed blower motors change that rating as well. There's a lot of different things that are tied in there. So don't look so hard at that number. In my opinion, what I tell everybody is, don't look at that and say, okay, now I'm going to save X amount of dollars in a year, because I believe there are way too many variables for anybody to tell you accurately. Because if I tell you, okay, well, your gas bill is going to go from $80 a month down to $75 a month with this new furnace, something will happen next year and it'll be really cold. And it won't be able to make that difference, or maybe it'll be really mild and it'll be way over that difference. There's just too many variables in there to guess. What I use that AFUE rating for is just in comparison from one furnace to another. A 96% efficient furnace is going to do way better on efficiency than an 80%er is. If you've got an older furnace and it is an 80, or even older than that, and it's, down in the 70s or something like that, that 90, 96% efficient furnace is going to do way better than that 80 or less. So, just look at it as for comparison. And typically the higher the AFUE rating on it, usually those are the better furnaces. I tell everybody, if you watch my other videos, that I preach about make sure you get the best warranties, make sure you get the best quality, make sure you get, the best furnace you can get for your dollar. That's the most important part out of all of it. Efficiency is there, but most contractors are usually dealing with pretty high efficiency furnaces these days. Me personally, and I'm not going to get too far into it because I do have another video out there about 80% furnaces versus 90% furnaces. So if you want to take a look on the channel at that, that's my little sales pitch for today. But I do have a video comparing, the two furnaces as far as which one's better than the other. But in my area, there's not too many contractors that are doing 80% efficient furnaces, unless maybe it's a rental or maybe like an apartment building where it's low income apartment housing or something like that. We do have several of those around here to where they want the cheapest furnace they can get. That's an option out there, but most contractors should be doing 90% efficient furnaces. If any contractor ever tells you that it's just too expensive to go to a 90 compared to an 80, you need to ask a couple contractors, ask around, because there's not that big of a price jump. It's not astronomical where it would like throw you out of that realm of if this furnace is worth it or not. So it's not that big of a jump, so don't let contractors tell you that. But usually if you do buy the mid to upper 90% efficient furnaces, they usually are the better ones. They usually have the better warranties. They usually have all the ECM or the variable speed blower motor. They usually got 2-stage gas valves. They usually have a better heat exchanger. A lot of them are tubular stainless steel. There's a lot of different things that go in there, but usually I don't know if you can hear it or not, but a couple of teenagers just pulled up in a car next to me with the stereo just blaring and bumping. So, I don't know if you can hear that or not, but that's what that is. But either way, just use it for comparison to look at the better furnaces. If you have any questions out there whatsoever, hit me up in the comments. I get questions from viewers all the time, and I love seeing them. I like talking to people about it. I like talking about heating and air. That's why I have a YouTube channel, specifically for heating and air. So, hit me up on the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe. If you're not subscribed, please do so. That way I can see there's enough people that actually want to watch the videos, so I can keep doing them and make it worthwhile. And share it with a friend. If you got a neighbor, a friend, if you know another service tech, or if you know a neighbor or a friend, family member, whatever, that's looking to get new equipment, share my channel with them. That way they can see what some of the differences are. And if you are looking for a new furnace, check the channel out. There's a lot of different videos out there and comparing some of the air conditioners, some of the furnaces, and different types of equipment. A little bit about geothermal and everything on there. So be sure to check that out. Like I said, if you have anything, just let me know. Otherwise, thank you and God bless.